okay, there will be some consumers who want some degree of tailored experience in ads. I absolutely believe that there is a technical solution that allows that decisioning and tailoring to happen within the consumer's own control, their own device or agent. I came up with a proposed standard to label cookies with their implications. It was called trust labels. Be ready to adapt and don't bet the farm on just one technology or ID spine or something.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, Jaye is the founder and CEO of Aqfer, a marketing data platform on top of which others can build their own MarTech and AdTech solutions like, for example, a customer data platform, a CTP, or any other proprietary tool that could leverage their first-party data collection, activation, or analytics capabilities. Dan is well known in the MarTech and AdTech industries, having founded companies like Engage or Korrelate and having advised companies like Brave Browser, Akamai, or Ghostery. He's also the former president of TACODA, if that rings a bell, bought by AOL in 2007, and back in the day, the director of high-performance computing at Fidelity Investments. But even more relevant to this podcast, he was one of the first executives to apply privacy by design principles, we wouldn't call them that back then, to marketing databases, as well as one of the leading voices in the privacy-enhancing methodologies and standards that first saw the light some 25 years ago, like p3p. So when we talk about cookies, consent standards, or global privacy control, he has pretty much seen it all. We recorded this interview on the day that followed Google's announcement that it would not deprecate third-party cookies back in July. And we went far beyond his initial reaction and forecast for its impact on first-party data strategies into a vision for a more balanced future for all stakeholders. Let's go for it. Dan, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here.
It's a real pleasure. Look, you've been riding this roller coaster of cookies, privacy, digital marketing for many years. Let me start here. Google just announced that they are keeping third-party cookies after all. What do you think? Are we sticking with first-party data as the primary goal and strategy?
So there's my crystal ball from before yesterday, right? And I expected there to be a very fragmented market, a patchwork, no dominant technology, a bunch of different solutions depending on what you need for the midterm. And I tend to predict things a little bit too early. Like I thought IP addresses would be PII. I predicted that back in like 2002, and it took Schrems, whatever it was like 13 years or something until that.
In 2004, there was a German DPA already saying that, but only for ISPs.
Yeah. So we thought that was going to happen, but it took longer. But I think that there's a middle term where people are cobbling together a bunch of different solutions. There was a belief that the sort of quadrant in Ari's sort of view of the architecture of the sort of open ad supported internet was going to sort of become more and more of a desert because of lack of support. And as I said, we would have degradation of signal, we would have degradation of measurement, and we'd learn to live with it. We'd all operate kind of on a lower schedule, and then we'd gradually see things like Privacy Sandbox, sort of get past their toothing pains and start to solve issues. I have a personal belief that they, I've been an advisor to Brave, since pretty close to their founding. I thought we had a pretty good set of learnings from Brave on what privacy side, browser side, ad targeting and attribution and measurement could look like, and what some of the problems were, with their ledger technology. As I think other people have pointed out, I think all of this goes back very well to a paper out of Stanford called the Agnostic Browser, which was, I think, 2010, and that was a browser-based ad server. I think I personally believe that is still the long-term direction. What I call hyper-federated data, which is you have a billion databases, not one big database, and advances in homomorphic encryption, which is something we used at a startup of mine about 14 years ago. We first started using it there in sort of what we now call clean room examples. Things like that, secure multi-party computation and ledger, blockchain ledger technology, not crypto, but ledger technology. All of these would come together in some way to support a sustainable ecosystem. And I still think that is the long-term, sort of destination or point on the journey. But I think that could be 10 to 15 years out.
Good. But I like this idea. So we've had Brave on the show, talking about Brave ads and discussing the attention token, all that stuff. But what you said now about hyper-federated environments where everything, there's more sort of network centricity, right? How would that work? So how would you envisage that?
Well, I think there is one fundamental choice that consumers have to be able to make themselves at the beginning. That I think that if you put this choice in consumers' hands, it simplifies the conversation, which is, do you want consumers, or does a consumer want to have a different experience that is tailored to them? Because there are some people say that even if nobody knows anything, the fact that my experience is different, I don't want. So let's say that becomes a consumer choice, and we'll leave aside whether it's a default or how the choice is enacted. But if you take that off the table and say, okay, there will be some consumers who want some degree of tailored experience in ads, and may want to participate in an ecosystem where there's value exchange, like free content and free tools. So leaving aside that there's a choice mechanism, transparency and choice, but I absolutely believe that there is a technical solution that allows that decisioning and tailoring to happen within the consumer's own control, their own device or agent, and to have zero knowledge about an individual consumer exposed to external parties. The question is, we still got to run businesses. We got to know, did it work? Did it not work? There's a value exchange. How does that value exchange get transacted? All of those things. And again, the advances we've had, zero knowledge proofs and ledger technology, the ability to do frequency counts across 1 million browsers using homomorphic encryption, building distributed models and building those targeting models, again, using some of these federated learning techniques. They're not practical today. They're too expensive. They're too inefficient. I have confidence that will get addressed. But I think, let's flip back past yesterday when the world changed and say, well, how does the Google announcement affect this? And I think there's two angles on this. One is the move to the first party is still happening because for two major reasons. One is maybe to some extent consumer driving it. Actually, I think it's litigation. right of consumer action and the legal exposure, the liability of the publishers and the brands for different issues related to privacy and tracking is just massive and increasing. And with the legislation in the US, with right of individual action, additional legislation, regulation is moving forward. Again, that whole side, regulation, litigation, I think that that's going to continue to create a push for first parties to keep control and to keep moving that forward. The second thing is Google has been, the announcement yesterday, the door was so wide you could drive a truck through it, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could play out. And one example is at some point or over the course of a year, Google puts forward a modal non-avoidable prompt to consumers that say, do you want sharing? Do you not want sharing? And arguably, you could see a future where more than 50% of consumers say no sharing. And Google can say, oh, you know what? Consumer decided it. What are you going to do? And the fact that, the Google approach didn't hurt Google very much. It just hurt everybody else. By putting it in the consumer's hands, they can kind of say, hey, it wasn't us, just doing what the consumer wants. And I think in that world, we end up part of the way to what they've talked about, because as I've argued elsewhere, Google's not getting rid of third-party cookies. They're just partitioning them in their proposal. It's chips, right? And chips, partition cookies are first-party cookies without any of the friction. So, and again, I could give reasons why I think that this will be the way it goes. One is that partition cookies break almost nothing. They give you a lot of the privacy advantages and protections, but they have few unintended consequences in terms of breaking apps and things like that. So I think that there is a world where this choice approach that Google is referring to, we end up in a place where 60-70% of consumers end up where they would have been if Google rolled out the third-party cookie deprecation. So that's where I am 24 hours or so post the announcement.
If Google is going to move this question, instead of just simply removing third-party cookies, but asking you as you install the browser or the first time you open it, a question that is unavoidable, where you are forced to make a choice, then yes, then maybe we get one advantage, because that's the other problem we've had, in Europe, and then it's propagating in a terrible way, which is that every single website has had to annoy people with a question.
That's exactly what we were trying to avoid. We wanted a seamless experience, and all the standards work I was involved in the 90s and the 2000s was about avoiding exactly what we have now,
exactly,
which is bombarding the user with prompt after prompt after prompt.
The European experience has been a mess, a nightmare. It's useless. Nobody understands what they're agreeing to. It destroys the accessibility of websites on a mobile phone. It blocks the screen. If we could get rid of this imposition of the consent legal basis, just for the very fact that you use a given technology, read from the device, write to the device. So that would be a solution. Google would help us have something that is more, seamless. And then, as you say, if this happens, then first-party data has a place, because it is very likely that a lot of people will say no.
Right.
So I cannot help remembering that much of this could have been avoided 25 years ago, when you were at the very forefront of innovation in the privacy-preserving marketing space. And I need to ask you about the origins of p3p, or Platform for Privacy Preferences. Sometimes I feel like I've come from another planet when I talk about how I used to publish XML-based p3p policies across the UK back in the day. Plus, I keep bumping into different alternatives these days that essentially try to replicate what we already had back then in order to avoid information asymmetry across both privacy notices and consent management methodologies. Can you give us some background on how that started, P3P?
So I was the co-author of the original syntax specification. And at the time, I was also working with the IETF. We needed cookies to make applications work. We called it state management mechanism. And I came up with a proposed standard to label cookies with their implications. It was called trust labels. We eventually made that part of the W3C spec, and that became what was called p3p compact headers. And I worked with the Microsoft Internet Explorer team to get that implemented as a mandatory feature, unavoidable feature in Internet Explorer, so that at least we had a labeling scheme. And we can talk another time about why it failed spectacularly, but it was the first web-wide ubiquitous privacy enhancing technology. And I'm still, very, very, very proud of what we got accomplished at that time. And it was machine readable, so you could have automated interrogation of it. I actually think the most important part of P3P, the best part of it rather, was the syntax specification. There were some great people from CDT and EFF who were involved in that. And I actually think the description of privacy policies, not the technology, not the standard, but actually the lexicon that was established, is something that still is very relevant for today. And I think, people have started from scratch again. And I think that they're, it's useful to look back at time.
The last question I'll ask you is publishers, right? Publishers, in the end, sort of represent the open inventory, right? And every time we look at a balance or a healthy market, we cannot sort of decouple it from the journalism and how healthy it is for democracy, and the fact that they cannot really make a living in this world where they're not really built for targeted advertising. Do you see that there is a natural fit of media? I don't know if it's contextual advertising, it's been overhyped. I know we've had that debate as well. But what do you see? I know this is the crazy $1 billion question, but what do you see publishers, legacy media, or quality media, so to speak, playing a role in this next stage?
Well, I think it's always been critical. Look, from the very beginning, when we were creating the NAI, when we were doing the original work with the FTC, the argument has been somewhat of an antitrust argument, right? It's that you can't put all the power in back then we said AOL and Yahoo, but you can't put all the power in the form of the a few dominant players. You're going to stifle innovation, but it's also not going to be healthy in terms of the accessibility of content and quality content on the internet. So the publishers, they've done a great job of sort of starting to throw up their paywalls and their reg walls and ways to mitigate this. But the fact of the matter is that's just like the prompts, right? You create barriers between consumers and content and community, that in the end it's stifling. And so publishers need to keep the doors open as well. They can work on a path to take consumers to develop a relationship, but the fact is consumers aren't going to pay to 10 different publishers. Maybe you're going to get some of these pay one price tickets that let you access a bunch of different publishers. That's been a long time coming and overdue, but general subscription, blanket subscription features. But the fact of the matter is an open media internet is critical to innovation and health, and publishers need to support that and have at least some things that are out in that open internet, not everything behind the RIP paywall and the reg wall to enable that. And again, the sort of long-term vision of this, I think, gets there, right? That you can have stable economics in that environment. Anti-fraud is obviously a big issue, a big challenge in that area, maybe the biggest challenge. But I think that's where we go. And we also just have to create an ecosystem that supports, variable resolution. And by that, I mean, you've got use cases that are more intrusive, that need more consent and awareness. And you have use cases that are relatively innocuous. And, that doesn't mean that if I have a big database and I said, oh, I promise that it's good, that's adequate. We've seen that with the AT&T data breach. Every big database has a bullseye on it. And that's actually the reason why I believe the future is hyper-federated data. Is, the risk is very low. The value of hacking into one of a billion databases is very low versus the value of hacking into a database that has a billion data points. So, but I think that's really the role of publishers, is to not just cower in their behind their walls, their paywalls and reg walls. I think that they have to participate in a healthy internet that supports both.
Thank you. I really like that. And the fact that this is not binary, there's got to be a way to tell, apart different uses of even, personalized advertising. Dan, anything else you would like to add? Any last thoughts or comments? Anything that people should read or pay attention to?
Well, I think the most important thing is we just got to be agile. I don't mean agile development. I'm saying, look, there's going to be change. There's going to be complexity. There's a lot of different things that we have to deal with, and you've just got to be. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You've got to just be ready to adapt, right? I think the partition, the chip standard, I think still that's what Firefox does today by default, right? So that is out there. I don't think we know I haven't heard what Edge is going to do. They support partition cookies. Are they going to make it the default? Are they going to go what are they going to do? So we have to sort of be ready to play in all those areas. That's kind of the only advice I could give is be ready to adapt, and don't bet the farm on just one technology or ID spine or something.
Thank you, Dan. Very illustrative. Thank you. Very helpful.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, that's all for today. Please follow the Masters of Privacy channel on LinkedIn if you want to find some interview transcripts, cheat sheets, and other useful resources and surprises every now and then. On top of that, episode notes and other feeds are available on mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.